after God spent 6 long days creating the world, God saw all that God had made and said, V'hine tov, it is good. God's declaration of the goodness of the world underpins the notion that everything that happens is for the good. Our modern critical minds know the flaws of this theology. There are certain things that happen in life that we cannot conceive of as being good. No matter how hard we try to adopt a new perspective or to look from a different angle, death of children, incurable disease, global pandemics, just to name a few, these things are not good. I do not believe God wants these events to occur. And even though these things may ultimately produce silver linings, I'm not sure that the suffering is worth it in the end. A silver lining refers to the silver around a cloud when it is backlit by the sun or moon. When we use the phrase, we typically are referring to unpleasant things having some type of positive side effect, or thinking a negative situation can eventually produce something positive. I've heard from some of you about your silver linings during the pandemic. Some of you have shared how you've gotten to know your children in a deeper way. Others have been in touch with friends who they otherwise have not had time to reach out to. And some of you have now made time for walks and other exercise that you don't typically prioritize. And then, of course, there are the comical silver linings. Being flexible about which toilet paper brand to buy, or no longer having to think about if your pants match your shirt when all your meetings are on Zoom. Thinking about these silver linings can help us get through, but when we are in it, it is certainly hard to see the positive side of things. Nothing felt funny in mid-March when the city was at a standstill. People were sick and dying all around us, and it didn't feel safe to step outside. So what if we were to replace the concept of silver linings? Rather than trying to find the good in the bad, we could just let the bad be bad. What if we then just focus on getting through that bad and allow it to strengthen our resilience? You can't build muscle without lifting weights, and you can't build mental stamina without going through soul-challenging times. Allowing the ugly in our lives to exist in all its darkness certainly makes the hard feel harder. But ultimately, it's strengthening us. And as we grow strong, we can get through with more ease. The notion of a silver lining somehow feels like it's trying too hard. And it actually isn't so harmonious with the way our tradition understands our capacity for finding joy or solace in challenging times. In Hebrew, there's actually no such phrase. Instead, we use a phrase taken from the Bible in the book of Judges. There we read of a riddle based on true events presented by the judge Samson. Samson kills a lion, and after a while he finds bees and honey coming out of the lion's skeleton. From this story comes the phrase, Me'az yatsa matok, out of the strong came forth sweetness. This phrase teaches that from the bad, good might eventually come, rather than insinuating that there is good in the bad. Looking back on this past year, Me'az yatsa matok feels like a helpful reframe. What if we were to look at the challenging times that demanded the most strength from us, and instead of silver linings, reflect on the moments of sweetness that we were able to summon later on? Simply, we could give ourselves permission to acknowledge that parts of this past year were just plain awful, and not force ourselves to find the silver linings. Perhaps then, when we are past these hard times, and we will be, we could see the sweetness in our lives more clearly. In this moment of transition from one year to the next, with our eyes set on the year to come, you might be wondering, Will 5781 be sweet? I am careful in this moment not to make you any promises. I often get visions in my head about what I think something will look like. For example, I had this vision that while I was on maternity leave, I would stay by my parents in Connecticut. Maybe we would travel somewhere for a little bit to visit friends on the West Coast or even go to Israel. Of course, none of this happened because 1 week after Avi was born, the city and most of the world shut down because of COVID. I had to manage my disappointment that what I had wanted maternity leave to look like was actually going to be incredibly different. From a Zoom bris to not seeing my parents for almost 2 months, life as a new mom, the way I had envisioned it, was radically different. Instead of having my vision come to fruition, I had to re-envision what my life as a new mother would mean in the context of COVID. So as we enter 5781, I am careful not to envision too much, or at least not to rely too strongly on those visions. We don't know what is in store for this year to come. Our ability to plan feels quite paralyzed given what we know and don't know about COVID, given the increase in destructive weather patterns, given our political situation. We are doing our best to gather safely with our family and friends. We are doing our best to figure out education for our kids. We are doing our best to keep ourselves safe. While doing our best, can we still dream? And can our dreams be sweet to us? Given everything we have been through, I still say yes, we can still dream. I think of the best dreamer we have in our Jewish tradition, Joseph. Even when Joseph is at the bottom of a pit, unsure if anyone will find him, his clothes tattered, his heart filled with hurt and betrayal, he still dreams. And his dreams ultimately allow him to see beyond the pit. His ability to understand and interpret dreams ultimately elevates him to royalty and provides him with a good life. When we are in life's narrow places, our vision is very limited. So how do we see beyond? We see beyond by broadening our mind beyond the narrowness and dreaming like Joseph. Put another way, think of a puzzle. If you open a 5,000 piece puzzle and take one piece out, it would be impossible to place it where it should go. For absent are the other 4,999 pieces. There is no real way to understand how that one puzzle piece fits. Rather, the one piece you hold connects to another piece, and then that piece fits into another. And before you know it, you have a section complete. This, of course, takes time and patience. And perhaps the lesson is, remember, we never have the whole picture. Many of you might not know this, but I wanted to be a parent for a very long time. I struggled often with not having this piece of my puzzle. So many moments were filled with longing, despair, a feel of something lacking in my life. Sometimes I felt like I had no control over the situation, and many, many times I didn't. I had to trust that my dream of becoming a parent would eventually come true if I stayed focused and connected to my dream. But as I look back, it was really hard to trust that the dream would come true. And now I have an Avi, and I am a parent, and all that time of longing and out of controlness has faded into the past. Of course, it remains a part of my narrative, but no longer center stage. It was but one piece of my puzzle that has connected to so many other pieces that make up who I am, and now who my family is. That puzzle piece, those days of the past, did not feel sweet. But now when Michelle, Avi, and I are hugging one another, the sweetness of this moment, this section, is overflowing, and I savor it all. Today is known as Yom Harat Olam, the day of the world's birth. Birth is truly amazing, a part of living that connects us to a greater sense of holiness. Our world may not always feel sweet to us, but when there are moments of norah, awe, we should savor them. The poet Mary Oliver writes, "Someone I love once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift." What is sweet? The absence of bitterness. So let's dream. Let's dream for a sweet new year, and even if it doesn't come true or we don't feel it, let's savor the moments that do exist. Our tradition has always taught us to mix the salty with the sweet, the bitter herbs with the haroset, the broken glass on a wedding day, the pain and joy of childbirth. We are strong enough to hold both, because out of the strong can come the sweet. So how do we derive strength from this past year? First, take pride in how you managed during these unprecedented times. At the beginning of April, Queen Elizabeth addressed the citizens of the United Kingdom for only the 4th time since she began her reign in 1952. The Queen said, "I hope in the years to come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge." As we look back over this past year, can we be proud of how we coped? Can we say to ourselves, "I did the best I could despite the circumstances"? This is where rachamim, compassion, comes into play. Self-compassion can help lead us to feelings of goodwill around coping. In the Talmud, we read, "Be similar as it were to God, the Almighty. Just as God is compassionate and merciful, so too should you be compassionate and merciful." To have compassion for yourself means that rather than telling yourself to deal with it or be strong, acknowledge that things are hard. Recognize that you are imperfect, just like all of us, and that it's just as acceptable for you to be that way as it is for everyone else. We can also derive strength from this past year by recognizing and internalizing our shift in priorities. One of my best friends, who might be the most active person I know, she's always overscheduling and jam-packing her day with social commitments, work, and self-care activities. However, she has now said to me over and over again that since the pandemic started, every time she is away from her 3 boys, even if it's just to go to Trader Joe's, she misses them. And others have shared similar shifts in their relationship with their loved ones. Bonds that existed between family and friends have grown stronger and deeper since we couldn't be distracted by our daily routines and going out and about. The pandemic has presented us with an opportunity to slow down and pause, to distill what is most important to us. In 1918, when houses of worship were closed throughout the US because of the threat of the Spanish flu, the Reverend Fletcher Parrish of the 11th Avenue Methodist Church in Alabama reflected on the words of Genesis. He preached, "Men think they have no time to walk out in the fields for contemplation or to sit quietly by the fireside and muse. However, we have a God-given opportunity for this helpful indulgence by reason of this unique Sabbath which has dawned upon us. Out of necessity, our churches are closed and all public gatherings must be discontinued. We cannot go motoring, and we would not go to business if we could. And even the fields are dangerous lest we should come in contact with goldenrod or ragweed and take influenza. But we can sit by the fire and give ourselves thought and reflection, which will bring great profit to us." The prophet, as the Reverend speaks about 100 years ago, is our new sense of what is actually important. Relationships, self-reflection, time to just be. From these things, we have become stronger. Me'az yatsa matok. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. The Hebrew word for strong in the phrase me'az yatsa matok is spelled in Hebrew with a mem, ayin, and zion, pronounced me'az. If I were to change just one vowel underneath the ayin, I would get the Hebrew word me'iz, dare. And from one little switch, the phrase turns into dare to come out sweet. Perhaps we can defy 5780 by daring to come out sweet in 5781, to rise above, to challenge ourselves to control what we can control and let go of what we can't, and dare ourselves to have a sweet new year. Shana Tova U'Metuka. Have a sweet, sweet new year.